Hello everyone and welcome to the second part of PCB making series. In the last part I talked about designing the PCB itself on a computer, making a single-sided PCB design. In this part I will tackle problems faced during PCB picking, preparing and calibrating, so keep watching till the end. Yet the video is divided into chapters in case you would like jumping into a point directly. In the next part I will talk about the etching theory and how a PCB is really made, and we'll make the first manufacture step. So without any delays, let's get started. Now, what I always do and strongly suggest is do a test print. As in PCB production, you will have to use a laser printer for the final copper shape. More on that process in the next part. The way of printing heavily depends on the type of software used, but it should be pretty easy to do. But there is a very important thing to be reminded here, which is always print to scale. That means the scale factor of printing should be 1:1. Say for example, the space between two pins in the document you'll print is 0.1 inch. In real life, after the paper is printed, that also had to be exactly 0.1 inch, or really bad things will happen to you. That happened to me before. After exerting a lot of time producing this board and this PCB, etching, drilling, refining and everything, I figured out that I had a printer driver issue, rendering my PCB useless because the PCB was not to scale and no component could be inserted into the PCB, as of course pins distances were not correct. That's why you should definitely check your printer settings and be sure that printing size is correct. I used a normal laser printer and printed out my final PCB design, which will be at the end the bare shape of the copper. I also get those compact foams. I never threw them in the trash. You should put the A4 paper on the foam and start inserting your components through their place on the PCB through the foam, or in the PCB printed one in the A4 paper. This part is very important for two reasons. One, you will check if your printer printed to scale or not by placing the components and checking that the pins went through the printed holes on the paper correctly. Plus, you will check if you placed your components in an appropriate position. Sometimes in your design you might place a resistor very close to another resistor, or a heatsink for example very close to a plastic component. So you just check up the final look of your PCB this way and see if components really suit the way you designed them. If you don't have foam or anything like it, you would have to do this checking process one by one and try figuring out the shape yourself. Thus, I heavily recommend this way of checking the shape of your PCB and the correct scale of your print. After checking that your printer prints correctly and that the components are inserted also correctly, and by the way, be aware of mirroring. Be aware again of your program print settings. I am afraid I can't talk about this part a lot, as each software and OS might differ, so keep that in mind. Now you have to pick a nice fresh single-sided PCB to use and manufacture on. And all my PCBs ain't fresh at all, which might also be your situation or not, depending on from where you bought it. Anyways, you could see that PCB sizes might be a lot bigger or smaller than your designed PCB. You have two ways to solve this problem. Number one is to just redesign your PCB depending exactly on your PCB size you have available, which I do recommend for homemade PCBs. However, if you didn't find the correct PCB size at all, and if you couldn't redesign your PCB, you will have to cut your PCB to the correct size. This process might be dangerous depending on the tool you will use. You should work in a well-ventilated area. As stated in Electronics Tech Exchange website, the dust coming out from PCB cutting might be dangerous. Also wear eye protection. You could use a drill attaching a cutting disc to it, but that's totally dangerous if you are new to using your drill or don't have the experience using such a drill, because one single error and very nasty things might happen. But if you have the experience to cut using a drill or anything like it, I definitely recommend that, because it is the easiest way to cut. But keep in mind that safety should be number one in your work. If you don't have a drill or don't have the experience, what you would use might be something like a heavy-duty knife, which could be a good option depending on your PCB thickness, but it also might be dangerous and sometimes doesn't cut well onto the PCB. Another thing you could use is a saw. For my case, I used a small thin saw to cut. Really, how good is the cut and how long it will take is really experience related, so don't worry if it took you the first time 13 minutes to cut. And keep in mind, safety should be again number one in your work. And if you asked, I marked using lines the PCB size I wanted and added an extra 2 mm to each side just in case. And also try to cut as straight as possible. Again, your cut might not be straight line at all, but you could always try multiple cuts on old PCBs or ones you have to get the hold of PCB cutting. Be aware that your PCB might shatter if it's too big or might break while cutting. The last thing to do is to clean the cut PCB very well. The better the copper surface of the PCB, the more it will be easier to copy the ink on it, which will be in the next part of this series. You could use anything to clean the PCB copper side, just any cleaning tool you have. It doesn't matter as long as you don't use something that heavily scratches the surface. Continue cleaning until the PCB copper side is very clean and very reflective. The plastic side here doesn't matter at this point, so you might clean it as well if you wish. And with that, this video is finished. I don't want to make this video very long. And if you have any concerns, tips, questions, or even experience, don't forget to just drop them down below. I offer all my contents in Arabic, my mother language, and English. Don't forget to subscribe and see you next time.